Gentlelady from Maine, Ms. Pingree, is recognized for the purpose of an amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have an amendment at the desk, and I move that reading be dispensed with.
Without objection, the reading of the amendment is dispensed with, and the gentlelady is recognized for remarks on her amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to discuss a portion of the bill that I consider underfunded, and that is the funding to the National Endowment for the Arts and National Endowment for the Humanities. This is one of my favorite parts of this bill to work on, and one of my favorite parts that we fund here, our funding for our arts and cultural agencies. And while it's a very small portion of what we do, the funding that comes through the federal government, through the NEA and NEH, is some of the only funding that goes nationally to the arts. Now, many people would be like, oh, what's the importance of the arts? We've got a lot of other critically important things to fund, and we do. Medicaid, SNAP benefits, there are a lot of important things that we should be funding, but we should not be leaving it out. And the levels in this bill are as low as they have been since 2007, and that is a tragedy to see. These are very small but mighty agencies, and they work far above their weight. These support communities in all of our districts, and whether you know about them or not, you very likely have funding for arts programs through the National Endowment of the Arts and National Endowment for the Humanities that would not be funded any other way. This is visiting artists in the school. This is small community theaters. These are historical societies and libraries and reading programs for veterans. In fact, there are 678 counties across the country, most of them in rural areas, where the NEA does more to fund the arts than the top 1,000 foundations. In many communities, this is the only source of outside funding. And I know, having served on a school board, how critically important it is to get arts in our school curriculum, and often the only way you can fund them is through funding that comes from the outside. The arts and culture sector contributes over $1 trillion a year to our economy. It's a significant part of the economy. Arts and culture is more than agriculture, transportation, or construction, yet we often dismiss it as if it's sort of an add-on or something we do for fun, but it's a critical part of what we do. Now, I appreciate the fact that the Republicans, when they wrote the bill, put back into this funding mechanism $135 million. So the Trump administration cut it to zero. It was at $207 million, which is not a very large sum of money. But they added back $135 million. My amendment here would put in the next 72 and get us back to the 207. That is the level, as I said, the lowest level we've been at. Well, no, the $135 million is the lowest level we've been at. That would get us back to the level that we've been at. All I'm trying to do is keep the status quo for arts and culture. Now, I think the chair earlier said, is it okay to put arts in, not arts in, funding in, not in? Okay, I really do appreciate that you put the funding in, so thank you very much for that. What I don't like is this administration zeroing it out, but then deciding, well, it's arts funding that they determine how it goes. For instance, if they get the $250 million for the Kennedy Center and they decide how it goes, then that arts and culture is allowed. And what they've done with the NEA and NEH is taken $17 million that was allocated to the NEA and $17 million to the NEH and $40 million that they got through the reconciliation bill to create a sculpture garden of heroes that the president determined would be a good idea. So he's taking this money that was purposed for our communities, for our local funding, and using it for something that he determined would be a good idea for the arts. And just to make it clear, this sculpture garden of heroes are 200 heroes of the president's choosing, created by artists of the president's choosing, out of materials of the president's choosing, in a state of his choosing. So again, I appreciate that this administration has determined that there are good places for arts and culture, but this should be a decision that we all make. This should be funding that comes to all of our communities, and particularly when it comes to the NEA and NEH, this is money that should be restored, should be returned to its current level, the staffing should be returned to its current level, and we should go back to granting funds to our local communities. This is a vital engine for the arts. This is a vital source of funding. This matters in each and every one of our communities. This funding was cut dramatically by the president. I want to see it restored, and I want to see this funding restored. So I hope you will support my amendment and restore the funding back to $207 million for both the NEA and NEH to return to where we were. And I yield back.
Thank you, gentlelady. The gentleman from Idaho, Mr. Simpson, is recognized to respond to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a tough one. I don't think there's anybody in Congress that supports the arts or humanities more than I do, except maybe Mrs. Pingree. Unfortunately, this exceeds, there's no offsets on this. It would exceed the 302B, which has been approved by the full committee, which means this bill couldn't make it to the floor. Let me tell you what we did, though. The administration, or the OMB, recommended zeroing out the arts and humanities. We didn't do that. We reduced them substantially by, 35%, from the 207 down to $135 million each. The way it traditionally works, and has worked, and according to statute, is out of the 207 that goes, let's pick the National Endowment for the Arts. They get $207 million. 40% of that, which would be about, $83 million, goes to the states, and that supports state arts councils and so forth. My concern was, what if we give the $207 million or the $135 million to the arts, but there's nobody there to take it because they haven't appointed anybody to the National Endowment for the Arts or the National Endowment for the Humanities? What happens to the money then? So what we did is say, listen, if there's nobody at the National Endowment for the Arts to accept this $135 million, that it all goes to the states, divided by the formula, which means instead of getting $84 million, $83 million divided up among the states, they would get $135 million divided among the states. And guess what? States arts councils that I've talked to said, hey, that's not a bad deal. So maybe this is the right way to do it. But I want to preserve the arts and make sure that we do that with the arts and humanities. Unfortunately, as I said in the beginning, this would exceed our 302B, and that meant that we wouldn't be able to get this bill to the floor. So I reluctantly, very reluctantly, oppose the gentlelady's amendment.
Are there other members wishing to address the amendment? Ms. DeLauro from Connecticut is recognized to address the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of Ranking Member Pingree's amendment. It restores the base level of funding from last year for the National Endowments for the Arts and Humanities. I can think of no more fitting example of the Trump administration's dismal vision for the future of America than cutting $72 million each from the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Endowment for the Humanities. The American people are struggling with the cost of living crisis, but this administration is not only cutting the programs that help people to survive, like food stamps, Medicaid, and public housing, but also the programs that help Americans experience life fully. At one time, I served as president of the Arts Council of Greater New Haven. I learned firsthand how much the arts mean to people. They make us stop and appreciate the beauty and the mystery of the world. They open us up to new ideas. They teach us new ways of communicating with those around us and force us to reckon with the bigger questions in life. The arts are about our humanity. In the words of one of my personal heroes, the late Congresswoman Barbara Jordan, and I quote, "The arts are not a frill. The arts are a response to our individuality and our nature and help to shape our identity. What is there that can transcend deep difference and stubborn divisions? The arts," end quote. These words stuck with me, and I think about them every year when I open the ceremonies at the International Festival of Arts and Ideas, which just celebrated its 30th successful convening of arts and performers from around the world right in my own home on the New Haven Green. This festival is an event for the whole community, where people from all cultures can come together to appreciate music, dance, sculpture, and more. There are countless programs like this all across the nation that benefit from the efforts of the National Endowments for the Arts and Humanities, either directly through funding and logistical support or indirectly through the broader ecosystem of artists and conveners that the NEA and the NEH have helped to nurture, grow, and sustain. I've always believed that our lives are richer and fuller when we take the time to appreciate art, reflect on it, and perhaps most of all, to make it. And public support and access is essential for the arts to flourish rather than becoming stagnant and dependent on private philanthropy. That is why I've always fought to protect funding for our national arts programs. Every great nation around the world funds its arts, its galleries, its museums, because they recognize that the arts are not a luxury or a distraction. They are essential. They are common heritage and a way to celebrate a shared national identity. That is one more reason why this bill is so disappointing. These cuts, as well as cuts to the Smithsonian Institution, are the definition of penny wise and pound foolish. And arts and cultural industries generated over $1.2 trillion in economic activity last year, according to a collaboration between the National Endowment for the Arts and the Bureau of Economic Analysis. The NEA and NEH are crucial funding sources that help this fast-growing sector thrive. America's achievements and contributions to the arts are critical to our national identity and unity, and these programs ensure all Americans can join our shared culture. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment, and I yield back.
Thank the gentlelady. The gentlelady from Ohio, Ms. Capter, is recognized to address the amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I rise in strong support of Ms. Pingree's amendment to restore funding for the National Endowment for the Arts and Humanities, which have been cut $144 million, or 41% below the 2025 enacted level. The country could actually use a little more humor at this point in its history, and the arts and humanities really are the heartbeat of our country and our communities. They create joy, music. They create understanding and promote creativity, which is at the fundamental definition of what it is to be an individualist in this society and to enjoy the blessings of liberty. They preserve our shared history, give voice to the voiceless, and help us understand one another across generations, across backgrounds and across beliefs. In the part of America I come from local theaters to museums, to our zoos, to our cultural festivals and community murals, we see how creativity builds civic pride. It is who we are. My hometown of Toledo is where the literary heroine Nancy Drew first came to life. The Carolyn King pseudonym actually was stated in the Toledo Blade, our local newspaper, by journalist Mildred Wirt Benson, who wrote many of the first Nancy Drew mystery novels before 1953. A documentary project to honor this American icon came to a grinding halt in April when filmmaker Kathleen O'Connell received a letter from the federal government saying her production grant from NEH had been terminated. The letter came with no explanation. This is a very unfortunate example of this administration's holding back already appropriated funding promised to our communities. Handcuffing artists who tell America's story and share it with the American people deserves honor. I really do wonder who some of those folks are over at OMB. Humorless. When I see them on TV, they never smile. They always look down. They look really dour. I think they haven't been exposed to the arts and humanities enough. Now, Ms. O'Connell had planned to present the documentary at community screenings at local libraries around our country, allowing a new generation of readers to fall in love with Nancy Drew and her adventures, and most importantly, reading. In January of this year, the Wall Street Journal reported literacy scores among youth in our country were at the lowest level since the 1990s, with only about 60% of fourth graders and 67% of eighth graders reaching basic proficiency. That means a whole lot of our youth are falling by the wayside. This is a problem, America. Wake up. This Nancy Drew documentary was also going to air on public television, allowing it to reach almost everyone in the country. But last week, my colleagues across the aisle voted to gut funding for the public broadcasting system. gut funding for Big Bird, gut funding for creativity, gut funding for food, housing, and healthcare. Where will it stop? One has to be pretty dour to think of America in the way they are over at OMB. I urge my colleagues to please support this amendment. When we invest in the arts, when we invest in education, in innovation, and in healing, support this amendment to keep America's culture and history alive, not just in Washington, New York, and Chicago, but in all of our communities and available to all Americans. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I support the gentlelady's amendment with full throttle. I yield back.
Thank the gentlelady. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized to address the amendment.
Very much. Mr. Case and I make the argument, and others have made the argument, that if you lead with the argument that we have a cap and therefore we can't take the bill forward, that was a decision that was made. Life's a series of trade-offs, and you decide what you think is important, and you spend money on that. But if you cap, and I will argue this, frankly, when the financial services bill is considered sometime in September, we have made a decision to cap our dollars. It's called the 302B. We all voted against that 302B and really had no input into it. But the other side made a decision through the reconciliation bill to cut a lot of funding. And they had to offset that. They had to offset their tax breaks for mostly wealthy people. 67% goes to the top 1%. So we are left not with an argument that this is not important, because the chairman, to his great credit, has said today, and he has said repeatedly, he believes this is a very important enterprise for us to pursue. And my judgment is, I may be wrong, that if we had sufficient resources for this committee to cover both environmental and other matters, as well as the NEA and the NEH, that the chairman would be in favor of the fiscal year 24 level that was passed in 23. So this is not a great sum that we are marking to. And I would say that this is about our values, and the vote will be about our values. Do we think this is important? Do we think pursuing the arts and humanities is important for the welfare of our country? Now, very frankly, if you're very wealthy, you can access all the arts and humanities you want to fund, want to access, see, hear, enjoy. But if you're not, and you're in the local school system or the local arts club, they don't get a lot of money, but they enrich the community, and they enrich each one of those who participate in it. So I would rise in strong support of the gentlelady's amendment. Very frankly, we can ask for a waiver. We can move forward with this. It's important to do. I urge its support.
Thank you, gentlemen. The gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Frankel, is recognized to address the amendment.
Microphone, please.
Lois's microphone.
Thank you. I rise in strong support of Representative Pingree's amendment to restore funding for the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Endowment for the Humanities. That is a mouthful there. But listen, this is very personal to me. Many of you know that as I listen to our debates, I like to doodle. Oh, here's one of my doodles today. Not one of my best doodles, but it is a doodle. And you know what helps, keeps me focused on these lengthy discussions back and forth with our colleagues. And later, Mr. Chair, with your permission, I have an exhibit. Later, I take these doodles and I put them on canvas. That does not represent anybody I know, but that is one of my doodles. That's where the joy begins, because I go into my little paint room, I put on my favorite music, Diana Ross, the Beach Boys, sometimes Carole King. You could tell when I was growing up. And then I paint. And like millions of Americans, I suspect, like some in this room, I'm looking right at one, Mr. Alfred. I suspect that the arts bring so much joy into people's lives, whether it could be, painting or playing an instrument or seeing a play or visiting a local museum, because arts lift us up, they give us meaning, and connect us in ways that you can't put a price tag on. Is it, oh, you okay? Okay. And that's why gutting funding for the arts and humanities by nearly 40% is so sadly wrong, because when we invest in the arts and humanities, we're investing in education, we're investing in jobs, we're investing in our own stories. The arts and humanities help us understand our past, see the world through someone else's eyes, and imagine a better future. They preserve history, give a voice to people too often ignored, and importantly, they build bridges in a time when division and distrust are running wild. And so cutting the arts, it's an attack on learning, on creativity, on critical thinking, and the soul of our democracy. And the impact is real. It will hurt museums, libraries, cultural centers, schools, especially those serving kids and underserved communities. We know art education keeps students in schools, they boost test scores, and even help kids graduate. And let's not forget the economic impact that some of my colleagues have discussed so far. In my own home area, which I'm so proud of, and we have places like the Kravis Center and the Norton Museum, and the Murakami Museum, the Cox Science Museum. I could go on and on. The arts generate over $300 million a year just in Palm Beach County, supports over 4,000 jobs, and attracts millions of visitors. And across the county, the arts power local businesses, fuel tourism, and keep Main Streets alive. But beyond arts, the dollars and cents, the arts binds us together. I think everyone can think of a painting, a song, a performance, or a film that moved us. Maybe this painting is moving somebody. My cat liked it, I will tell you that. But listen, something that stayed with us, opened our eyes, or made us feel less alone. The power of arts is part of what makes life worth living, and we can't afford to lose that. So let's stand up for our educators, our artists, our curators, our historians and dreamers who help us better understand ourselves and one and each other. And let's pass this amendment to restore funding and send a message. The arts and humanities are as essential to our communities as schools and roads and hospitals. They're the heartbeat of who we are. Let's keep those doodles alive. I urge my colleagues to vote yes, and I yield back.
Thank you, gentlelady. Gentlelady from Pennsylvania, Ms. Dean's recognized for comments on the amendment.
And I rise in support of this amendment too, which would restore the base level funding for the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Endowment for Humanities to the 2025 levels. But if I'm doing the math correctly, I think that would really be what was the 2024 enacted levels. In my community, PA Humanities supports expanded access and awareness of the humanities, including by making grants to nonprofit organizations, which funds are provided by NEH. In my districts, and I really urge you all to take a look at summaries of that which has been funded in your own districts. It is really important. It's not a huge amount of money, but these grants are incredibly important to our communities so that we too might have budding Lois Frankels among us. What we have in my community, we have care grants for many libraries, including Muhlenberg, Boyertown, Pottstown, Huntington Valley, North Wales, Lower Providence. We have art centers, White Marsh Art Center, North Wales area libraries, Kutztown, Muhlenberg, Brandywine community libraries, getting support for the arts through federal funding, and so much more. So much of it has to do with our children. So much of it has to do with whether it's performance or art, and seeing budding artists along the way. It enriches all of us. As my colleagues are likely aware, on April the 2nd, DOGE terminated the contracts of all state humanities councils. You know what that meant for Pennsylvania? $1.2 million in general operating funds to support their staff, operations, and programs, gone, wiped out. Thank you, DOGE. PA Humanities has had to reduce staff, work hours, pay, as well as stop grant making and pause programming, all at the time of summer, when so much could be going on for our young people. On June 25th, NEH rescinded PA Humanities grant termination, but it did not reinstate their appropriated funding and deobligated, I love these verbs, deobligated additional dollars, meaning $1.1 million is still lost to the state for FY25. To me, this is simply unacceptable. This hurts ourselves when we do this. We must push back against these unconscionable cuts and continue to demonstrate robust, bipartisan, increasing, not flat level, not cuts, support for arts and humanities. And so I'm very delighted that Representative Pingree has brought forward this amendment, and I urge my colleagues to support it. I yield back.
Thank you, gentlelady. Are there any other members wishing to address the amendment? Seeing none, the gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute to close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You've heard compelling arguments about how the arts play a vital role in our community or a vital role in our lives. This is often the only source of funding for many of our communities. And we have the opportunity to do something very good here today to make sure we restore that funding so that our communities are whole, so that our schools continue to have arts in the schools, so our local community theaters and dance troupes and music organizations all can thrive. So people can have these opportunities no matter whether they come from a wealthy community that has plenty of resources or one that's strained for resources but can use these federal dollars to do these good things for our communities, for our kids, to bring us closer together, to bring us all the same opportunities. So I urge you to support this amendment, and I yield back my time.
I thank the gentlelady. The question is now on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from Maine. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. No. And the chair, the noes have it. And the amendment is not adopted.